Welcome to WizeUp. I'm Paul Arthur. Freedom. I think we take it for granted, and you don't know how much it's underappreciated until you start to lose some of it, right? As in Quebec right now, could they possibly lose the freedom to pray in public? Going to talk more about that and some other stuff today. Our guest is John Carpay. Many of you will recognize that name. He's the president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, and he joins us from Calgary, their website, jccf.ca. John, good to have you with us. Maybe first of all, for anybody not familiar with what you do, can you tell us a bit about what your organization is all about?
Yeah, well, good to be with you, Paul. And the Justice Center is a nonprofit registered charity. We are a legal charity that defends charter rights and freedoms, such as freedom of religion and conscience, freedom of expression, freedom of association, peaceful assembly, travel, mobility. And we have a team of lawyers across the country who represent Canadians whenever the federal government or provincial government or even a municipal government or even a school board violates these fundamental rights and freedoms, such as the right of parents to raise and educate their own children as the parents deem best, the right of children to be protected and guided by their parents. And so we rely entirely on voluntary donations. So we don't ask for or receive any government funding. It's all voluntary donations from Canadians. And with that, we've got our team of lawyers and paralegals and communication staff. And so our mission is to defend the charter rights and freedoms of Canadians in the courts of law and in the court of public opinion.
Well, I can say over the years, John, I've interviewed you for many years, and you've made a big difference, your organization. You've helped a lot of people who would be in trouble otherwise. Don't win every case, but man, it's an ongoing battle, isn't it? So let's get right to it with the Quebec Premier, Francois Legault. He seems to think it's a good idea to, well, at least he's considering, outlawing prayer in public. So what's the story behind that?
Well, you've got a healthy concept of the separation of church and state, which properly understood means that the bishops and the pastors and the rabbis and the religious leaders are not making political decisions about how to spend taxpayers' money and where to build the next bridge across the river. And it also means that the state is not telling the pastor how to run a church service and what's going on inside the church and how people worship God.
That's probably a good thing, right? So, yeah.
So we've got a healthy separation, church and state. We've got a legal principle that you cannot impose your religion on other people. So you cannot require somebody else to attend your mosque or church or synagogue. Now, as with all good things, it can get distorted and perverted. And so there is an idea that the Quebec Premier seems to be fond of, that the separation of church and state means that there's no religious expression in the public square. And we've seen, shades of this over the years where people say, well, if you've got religious beliefs, you shouldn't be involved in politics, or you shouldn't be allowed to fight for what you believe in because somehow that violates church and state, which is not true. You can have a religious conviction. Say the Quakers in the 1700s had a religious conviction that slavery was immoral and slavery needed to be abolished. And they got involved in politics, and it took them 50 years of lots of hard work, political activism, but they got slavery abolished in the British Empire. But they were criticized for trying to impose their religion and bring religion into the public square.
Wow.
So what's going on in Quebec is the Premier is responding to, he doesn't like that there's some schools where there's Muslims who are praying 5 times a day, including praying at school. And the Muslims are not all that receptive to this modern progressive sex education curriculum that they have, and so on. And then he says, well, the solution to this problem is we need to ban prayer in public.
So not just in schools, but even beyond that, like public parks, on the sidewalk, that kind of thing?
He said you should only be allowed to pray inside a church or a mosque or a synagogue, but
Wow.
once you're outside, you cannot pray. And I've been told that in Britain it is illegal to pray quietly outside of an abortion clinic.
Yeah.
I haven't looked that up to verify it, but the media are reporting that even if you're not holding up a sign, just standing there praying is illegal in Britain.
That's what
So
I've heard. Yeah.
yeah,
So the pendulum's definitely going the wrong way from freedom.
and people need to contact their member of parliament, contact their MLA. Sometimes I hear
Okay.
people that they complain very eloquently about a situation and about how rights and freedoms are being eroded, or how there's a law that is unfair, or there's laws that treat parents unfairly. And then I ask the question, have you talked to your MLA about this?
Most of them have not.
No, it's like, well, you should talk to your neighbors as well,
Yeah,
definitely.
I think so.
But talk to your MLA, talk to your MP, at least get the ball rolling. Worst case scenario, and this might happen, but if it does, que sera, sera. Worst case scenario, they're going to say, "Get lost. I'm not interested in what you
Right.
have to say."
Yeah.
And that most of the time that will not be the response. But
No,
if
that's
it
right.
is, you haven't lost anything by trying.
Oh, for sure. Now, I know there's people saying that this is mainly an anti-Muslim thing from Premier Legault, but and maybe I know we have a lot of Christian viewers. We might be tempted to say, "Yeah, we need to shut up those Muslims." I don't think so, because you know what? If they get shut down, then so do Christians, so do Jews, or, pick whatever religion you want. We need freedom across the board. We may disagree on various religious views and so forth, but the right to practice our religion freely in Canada needs to be there for everyone, doesn't it?
Well, it does, and it's closely related as well to the right of parents to educate their own children in the faith of the parents, if the parents so choose. Children do not have religious freedom to, decide some Sunday
Yeah.
morning that they don't want to go to church because they want to be an atheist or whatever. Until children are, mature minors, 16, 17 years old, or until they reach the age of majority, which in Alberta is 18. So parents have the right to raise their children up in the faith, and that should include, often does not, but it should include as well the right of parents to educate their children and not have to pay taxes and then not have any educational choice and be forced to put their kids into a school that is undermining and teaching what is contrary to the faith. But that should apply to Muslims as well. If Muslims pay taxes, if they want a Muslim school where the kids pray 5 times a day, or however many times that would be during the school day, that 9 to 3. We should, people who love religious freedom and people who support the right of parents to raise their kids need to be supportive of that across the board.
And, we appreciate their take on the whole, sexuality teaching that's happening in our public schools. And again, most people of faith would disagree with a lot of that. So in that sense, we're allies. We need to work together, I think, in that. Let me ask, is there public support for this in Quebec? Because Quebec is a very secular society, and I know that's probably helpful when it comes to vote time. They want to keep it that way and so forth. But is there actually support to ban public prayer, you think?
I suspect that there are a lot of people in Quebec. Now, when I say a lot, maybe that's 20%, maybe that's 80%, maybe it's 50%. I don't know. But you've got a big chunk of the population that buys into this very anti-religious freedom idea that separation of church and state should mean that, parents don't have the right to raise their own children as they deem best, that you cannot pray in public, and so on. I suspect that there is some support for it.
So he'd probably have to use, I'm guessing that would be unconstitutional. So he would probably, and he's done it before, use the notwithstanding clause.
Yeah, there is a provision, Section 33 of the Charter. It was designed, it was put in there by Pierre Elliott Trudeau and the premiers of the day way back in 1982. They put in Section 33 to make it possible that if the courts issue a really stupid, impractical, or outrageous ruling that defies all wisdom and common sense, which happens from time to time, then the legislature can pass a law to opt out of the bad court ruling. What's going on in Quebec, though, it's a bit different. You've got the premier preemptively saying, "Oh well, we're already telling you ahead of time that we are crushing religious freedom, and we're going to opt out of the charter." I don't think the founders planned for this to be trotted out as a preemptive strike. I think it's supposed to be a fallback for a really stupid, impractical, or outrageous court decision.
This will be very interesting to see how this plays out over the next while. All right. Let's switch over to Nova Scotia. I understand they've made some changes recently that basically allow the government to access patients' private medical files. Is that right? Without their consent. So why would they even do that?
Well, the government claims that they need the data in order to manage the healthcare system, which is patently false because the doctors are already coding and the hospitals are already keeping records on how many back surgeries, how many cesarean sections, how many appendectomy if somebody's got appendicitis. The hospital is already keeping track of how many different kinds of surgeries, medical treatments are taking place. The doctor codes, when a doctor sees a patient, the doctor will submit to the government saying, I saw a patient, it was a 20-minute consultation about a rash they had on their elbow, whatever. This is what I prescribed. So all of the medical data is there, and it's available for governments to have on hand in order to manage healthcare, see what's going on. There's just no need to have politicians or health bureaucrats have any access to patients' records. And sadly, the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Nova Scotia did not oppose this law. They said, well, go ahead and pass it, and we trust that the politicians and the bureaucrats will never abuse it.
Oh my, that's I think a little naive. And I guess, have we bothered to consult the patients? Do they have any say in where their private medical information goes?
Well, the Justice Centre currently is in touch with some residents in Nova Scotia, and we're planning to file a court challenge to strike down the law because it violates the right to privacy, which is protected by the Charter under the Section 7 right to life, liberty, and security of the person.
Okay. And is there any kind of a public outcry, or people maybe not even terribly much aware of it at this point in Nova Scotia?
There's been some public outcry, but there is a lot going on in the world, so I guess a lot of people probably are not aware of this in Nova Scotia.
Okay. Well, again, until something happens and you go, oh, hey, what's going on here? That's my information, right? So I'm glad you guys are doing something about that. All right. Those of you watching in Nova Scotia, get on it. Now, I hear that efforts to suppress Professor Frances Widdowson are continuing. Of course, she has been labeled a residential school denier, I guess, if that's the correct term. She was fired by Mount Royal University. There was a Twitter war going back and forth there and so forth, and won't get into all the details of that. But although apparently she was recently at least partially vindicated, I think there was an arbitrator that ruled in her favor, saying, "Hey, you know what? The university was disproportionate by firing her." But they also realized that, hey, this is pretty tough to get her back to work there with all this animosity now. So there's going to be, I think, a financial payout going on, that sort of thing. But she apparently is, again, she was at MRU. I'm not exactly sure what was happening. There were some debates going on, I guess, in the hallways, and some former fellow professors, I guess, launched a complaint and said they've got some restraining orders against her, which she wasn't aware of, apparently. And so this whole thing is like ongoing. What's up with that? I mean, I know she's not politically correct, but, free speech, right?
Well, free speech is it was dying slowly, and now it's dying rapidly. And
Yeah.
the only way to save it is for Canadians to continue to exercise their free speech rights. And the worst thing going on is the self censorship, where people will no longer speak up.
Yeah.
This residential schools thing is a good example. There's a lot of people are scared to point out the fact that there is no evidence that has been discovered or uncovered or unearthed to prop up this notion that 215 Aboriginal children were murdered in Kamloops at a residential school. That's the word that the Kamloops Aboriginal band put out way back in 2021.
Right.
There's no evidence to support that, but yet they intimidate and say,
Hmm.
well, if you disagree that there's 215 children buried there, then maybe you're racist or white supremacist, or you're a Nazi, or you hate Aboriginals, or whatever, this kind of stuff. So Frances Widdowson, to her credit, like so many other Canadians, has questioned this narrative that children were murdered there, because again, there is no evidence to support that narrative. But we are suing the University of Lethbridge over canceling an event.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
Frances Widdowson was invited by a professor and I think some students at the University of Lethbridge to come and speak. And to her talk was how wokeism threatens academic freedom. So wokeism being wokeism, and woke being this progressive equity, diversity, inclusion,
Yeah.
very fanatical ideology that believes that there's racism and sexism everywhere, and that we shouldn't have equal rights. But anyway, it's a whole
Yeah.
ideology.
Hmm.
So her talk was supposed to be how does wokeism threaten academic freedom?
Yeah.
And in response to this, there's an angry woke mob that demanded that her talk be
Yeah.
canceled. And the president of the University of Lethbridge folded like a cheap tent.
Yeah. It kind of proves the point right there with the
canceled-
response.
proves the whole point. Like we can't, we can't talk about how woke ideology is threatening academic freedom. So this is in violation of the University of Lethbridge's own policies. They claim to support academic freedom and love for
Except
truth.
when we don't. Right? Like what?
So we're holding the university to account, and we've got some good. The Justice Centre over the years has secured some good free speech precedents in Alberta, and they are binding on the University of Lethbridge.
Well, I sure hope so. I mean, I know a while back, Premier Smith and the Alberta government, they put some sort of I guess a reporting requirement in place for universities, right? When free speech is being violated, or racism, that sort of thing, whatever it might be, that has to be reported, right? And I'm not sure if they actually would withhold funding from the university or something like that. Is that still ongoing? Is that in place?
Well, it doesn't have enough teeth, and it's not working.
Okay.
We need to talk a lot more about defunding universities.
Yeah.
And then they will say that, oh, that's censorship because you're telling us how to run our affairs. That's not censorship at all. If you're a recipient of a government grant, okay, let's say you're a welfare agency and you are providing assistance for severely handicapped people. There's conditions. The government might say, okay, here's $3 million so that you can help a whole bunch of people over the next 12 months. There are strings attached to the $3 million. You can't spend it any way you want. You've got a grant and you've applied for funding to look after severely handicapped people. And so the $3 million has to be spent in accordance with the grant. So it's not censorship to say that the University of Lethbridge and all the universities in Alberta should only get taxpayer funding if they themselves are respecting freedom of expression. And if the University of Lethbridge is not, then taxpayers should not be forced to fund an institution that is pandering to mob rule and not facilitating intellectual inquiry the way that Francis Widdowson was going to give a talk, there would have been a question and answer session, and there would have been opportunities there for people to say, "Look, wokeism does not threaten academic freedom." Whatever, who knows, right? But the event got canceled.
Oh man, that's just embarrassing. Meanwhile, at the University of Winnipeg, very interesting. The Students Association, they operate a BIPOC lounge, so Black, Indigenous, persons of color, right? Okay, so the lounge apparently has a sign at the entrance. So you walk in, there's this big sign saying, if you don't identify as Black, Indigenous, or a person of color, then you're not welcome. Yeah, that sounds Canadian.
Well, that's only between the hours of 10 and 4, right?
I think so. It's all apparently between
people
10
should
and
be
4.
grateful. People should be really grateful that they're allowed to go there. Come on, they're allowed to go there before 10, and they're allowed to show up after 4.
Wow, yeah. How odd of me to miss that point there. Of course, this fits perfectly with their diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, right? Everybody welcome.
This is woke ideology in practice. It is a negation of centuries of legal developments where we respect the individual, and we respect human rights, and for every individual to be treated with dignity as an individual, regardless of skin color. And so the woke ideology has flipped this on its head, where now it's like, well, because of your skin color, we've got quotas for a hiring system. You have universities that advertise for a position, and they say right in the advertisement, this position can only be filled by a woman, Aboriginal, person of color, LGBTQ, or a member of another equity-seeking group. And so right off the bat, it's like, men need not apply, which goes back to the way things used to be. You would have signs up saying, Jews not welcome here, women need not apply, Irish need not apply. That was a common sign, certainly in the U.S., I think in Canada as well, for a certain period. Irish need not apply. So there's just a blatant policy. We're not going to hire you based on your ethnicity. Well, we're back to square one when you've got a student lounge. Yeah. This is racism.
It really, really is.
It is outright, raw, naked racism.
In your face, absolutely.
In your face racism, and it doesn't bring us any closer to this harmony and utopia and no resentment, because these kinds of policies do cause resentment, and they don't make it they make it harder for people of different skin colors to accept each other, understand each other, appreciate each other, work together, live together. It's all made a lot harder by racist policies like the University of Winnipeg. And there too, it would be up to the Manitoba government can say, you know what, scrap that policy or we'll scrap your funding.
I think that's the way to go. I really do. That's you kind of hit them where it counts, right? Where attention will be garnered. I guess I just scratch my head as to, we have the highly educated people, in these positions of authority at universities and in government, and we allow this to go on. Why are we so afraid of open, honest debate? That used to be the hallmark, the crowning jewel of our universities. We come here to have these debates. That's how we get closer to a deeper truth. We know what works, what doesn't. You have these debates and you can disagree, and you realize not everybody can be right. Somebody's got to be wrong, but you have this debate, and at the end of the day, you're still friends. It's okay. How do we get to this place, and how do we get back to the place where it should be?
Well, what you're just saying just now, that's classical liberalism. That's the idea of the free society, and everybody has freedom of religion and freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of peaceful assembly.
Yep.
And so we respect, first and foremost, we respect the dignity and the value of every individual as created in the image of God. So this classical liberal, the free society, it has been eroded for decades, slowly but surely. And we're now at a point where people who hate the free society, and that would be the woke ideologues who are, for the most part, in charge of our universities, they hate the free society. They hate freedom of speech. They don't like the other freedoms. So what do? Well, we have to be active in the democratic process, and we have to make sure that our members of parliament federally and our members of provincial parliament or members of the legislative assembly, provincial elected representatives are all fans of the free society.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way to do it. If we don't elect people who support these fundamental freedoms, then we're going to go even further downhill than where we are now.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head that it's got to start from the grassroots up, doesn't it? Right? I mean, so we look at this, we go like, I'm not going to send my kids to university, right? Well, I don't know if that's the answer. We somehow need to replace, that engine that's driving this, craziness here. And we've got to replace some of those people with intelligent people who have common sense with them as well, to be respectful, to have the debate, to allow people to express their views without shutting them down, the whole cancel culture thing. So somehow we've got to be able to get people in those places of authority in our university system, right?
Yep, absolutely. So this would be an example. The university is our provincial responsibility. I mean,
Okay.
I think they get a little bit of federal funding, but it's fundamentally the province that has the Post-Secondary Learning Act or equivalent legislation. So whether you live in BC, Ontario, Alberta, the Maritimes, you contact your provincial politician and you send an email and you say, as a taxpayer, I want my tax dollars going
Yeah.
only to universities that respect campus free speech.
Yeah.
And if a university is not respecting free speech on campus, I want my I don't want my tax dollars going to that. And tell your elected representative that.
Yep. And I'm out of time. Got to leave it there, John, but you're bang on. Thank you so much. John Carpay, again, jccf.ca. Check it out. Thank you so much for watching. You can check out more programs at app.corcoplus.com or at wiseup.ca. God bless.